Welcome back to the Librarians of Solana podcast. My name is T. This week in the library, I am joined by battle-hardened extraordinaire and fellow teammate Matthew McInnis. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm just out here testing, playing the game constantly, hoping to win Worlds this year.
We got to get a Magnolia finish really high on the leaderboard, especially since Folks is on some copium, so, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start off today's episode by doing a little throwback. How do you feel that your Nationals event went?
I was pretty underwhelmed with my Nationals. I think I personally didn't do as good as I should have, but all of our teammates did pretty good, so I'm really happy for all of them at least.
Yeah, I feel like we had a pretty good showing at Nationals. Obviously, it was no runaway showing. We didn't put 4 into the top 8, but
yeah,
we've been doing pretty consistent with events like Battle Hardens and Callings lately, so we'll take those. Nationals, we had some reasonable placements, and hopefully we're going to bring it back for Worlds and have, I guess you, since you claimed it, you can win, I guess.
Yeah, that's the hope, right?
Recently in the past, you've had a lot of performance on Lexi, especially in Battle Hardens. Feels like most of your top 8s lately have come from Lexi ever since you put down Briar. Do you think that your play patterns or your performance will change when Lexi inevitably dies to Living Legend?
I don't think that mine will change. I mean, I'm just going to play the best deck that I can at every tournament and perform the best that I can, right? I just want to win everything, and I want to play at everything. Whether it's Lexi, or it's Dash, or it's Briar, or Viscera, whatever the best deck ends up being.
Sure. How do you feel that the meta is going to shake out for Bright Lights? Maybe before Lexi LLs and after Lexi LLs?
I think before Lexi LLs, it's not going to shake up too much. I think the original Dash will become a lot better. But I don't think the 3 new heroes will have that big of a showing with Lexi still around. Once Lexi goes, I think we could start to see a lot of Dash IO and maybe a bit of Teklovis running around.
And everyone seems to be scared about the book right now. How do you feel about Tomai?
I think Tomai is really strong. I think she's really good, and I am definitely worried about her going into the next 3 callings.
What are the next 3 callings that you're participating in? Obviously Dallas.
Yep.
Taipei is one, and then what's the other one?
Melbourne. So in about a week and a half, I'm going out to Taipei, and then the week after that, I'm going to Dallas, and then 2 weeks after that, I'm going to Melbourne.
Very nice. Seems like a busy travel schedule, but a lot of representation for Magnolia, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Yep, definitely. I mean, I love going to all the events. It's really nice. I love playing the game, seeing the world, just like James White tells us to do.
James White? I think a different company might have said that.
James White might have borrowed it from them.
James White might have borrowed it. Fair enough. Do you think that your outlook has changed a lot on Fab since you've joined the team, or since you started testing with the team?
Yeah, I think my understanding of the game got a lot deeper. Seeing and hearing things that I hadn't thought about previously. While I do think that we have some wild copium, I think that we have a lot of really good ideas and a lot of good fundamentals between all of our players.
Yeah, I think we definitely work really well as a group, especially when we can get some meaningful testing in. And I think that working as a team is very important for keeping up well-played games in events just over time. Like, it can get stale working on one format by yourself. So working as a team where somebody could come in and break the ice and think about like a new way to look at things, I think is very important. And I think that you're a great example of a player who's grown a lot since joining the team. Because we started off with, what is a pitch stack? And then got to, yeah, no, I know what my next card is. It's this. And the one under that is this. So definitely a lot of evolution there.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
We're kind of flying through what I had written down to go over, but we do have the big meat of this podcast episode coming up in a bit, and that is the Bright Lights limited format, both how our pre-releases went that we played in and how the draft format looks to shape up. We could go over a couple of pack one pick ones even, possibly, but we'll see what we have time for as we get there. I do have a section in every pod that I record where I have rapid questions interview, which is where I'm going to ask you a sequence of questions, and I need you to answer as fast as possible. The reason that it's as fast as possible is to get genuine answers from you so that you don't have to think super hard for a meme answer. Just whatever the first thing that comes to your mind is.
Sure.
So, Mr. McInnis, what is your favorite hero?
Dash, Inventor Extraordinaire.
What is your favorite card?
Throttle.
What is your favorite weapon?
Tecloplasma Pistol.
What is the favorite event you've ever played in?
Probably Worlds last year.
Worlds last year? The San Jose Worlds?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I just love the environment. I loved how everyone was having a good time. It was really nice to play in the first World Championships of Fab.
Mm-hmm. You didn't mind that it was in the tent?
What do you mean? We're going to the circus. Storvo's here.
Bro.
We're going back to LL format.
Bingo.
That's the circus.
Yeah.
Look, just ignore the toilets outside and it's fine.
Real. What is your favorite place that you've attended a tournament so far? I think this one is a great one for you because you've been to so many tournaments outside of the country too.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has to be Auckland, right? Going back to the home of Flesh and Blood itself was awesome and amazing.
I think that's almost exactly what Brody said too. So maybe I'll have to overcome my fear of flying and find a tournament in Auckland sometime in the future.
Definitely. I mean, there's that Grand Archive event soon. Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not that. Maybe not that one. Maybe like a Fab event.
All right. We'll wait for a Fab event.
And then finally, I have one specialized question that I ask everybody, and this is: what is your favorite psyop that you've ever posted on Twitter?
I don't post psyops. Everything that I post is true and has really deep meaning to it.
Hang on one second. Let me just pull up this recent tweet. It looks like just a picture. If I could pull this up, it's Grindstone Cog. Grinding gears.
Card's nuts.
Yeah,
so,
okay. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, I see Moonshot.
No, okay. Moonshot had a really good idea, and then I read the hero power of Max Nitro. I didn't realize that I had
September
to boost.
30th?
Yeah, I didn't realize that I had to boost to use this hero power.
Yeah, let me keep scrolling. What else do we have? There's got to be more psyops here.
I think the real psyop is that Lexi is a good hero. That's
you think that's a
psyop? Psyop. Yeah.
Oh, buddy. All right, I found the best psyop on your Twitter.
Yeah, which one is it?
It's the one where you retweeted the Bloons Card Storm tweet from Ninja Kiwi and said, "I will be playing this exclusively. Who wants to buy me out of Fab?"
That offer stands. I'll let anyone buy me out of Fab. I will be playing competitive Bloons TCG.
It's really hard to take that seriously the way you've said it. It's so hard to take that seriously.
I know, dude. It's so bad.
What is this? I've not actually seen this. What is this?
There's nothing out about it yet. We just know that there's going to be a card game. And it'll be digital to my knowledge.
Pick your favorite hero. Fill your deck with balloons, monkeys, and powers, and then do battle.
Yep.
Oh god, the comment section is just Fab players.
Yep. How do you think it hit my timeline?
Oh no. The first comment is Lucas tagging Fino.
Yep.
And then you said, "Do you guys want to start a team?" Okay, all right. You're banned, buddy. You're banned.
Hey, look, sometimes I just really want to win. And I know Lucas can help me deeply.
Yeah. I can't wait to play the Bloons game competitively. Holy, what a meme.
I mean, it'll be digital. You don't have to fly.
True. So is Legends of Runeterra, but...
Yeah, but Fab no longer is.
No more draft Fab. Too soon. Yeah, by the time you're watching this, draft Fab is dead. So, big rippers for draft Fab. What do you think the best way to draft now for practice is for people who don't have access to regular team testing or regular LGS? In my past 2 episodes, it's been me and Lucas and Brody talking about how important things like draft Fab are for the game. What is the answer going forward? This is not something that I've put much thought into.
I think it definitely has to be building up your local community, right? Like it's really hard when you don't have a local game store because I no longer have a local game store, so it's much harder for me. So I'm now looking for the solution for myself. I think it's going to be trying to build up a local community more, or taking the extra distance and going to join another local community.
Yeah. I think it's really tough for programs like that to get shut down. And like I can understand wanting the game to be solely paper and naming it Flesh and Blood because it's meant to be played in the flesh and the blood.
Mm-hmm.
But like something about it's tinfoil hat theory time. My tinfoil hat is on. Something about this announcement of them getting rid of Draft Fab doesn't feel like it's because of the reason they said. And it might be. Maybe I'm crazy. But it doesn't feel to me like LSS would pursue in saying, hey, you can't have this for a program like Draft Fab and not Talishar. Mm-hmm. Even though both put reasonable numbers of eyes on the game. It feels really weird to get rid of programs like that unless you have something planned.
I mean, I don't think they have anything planned. We've heard just earlier this year, James White reiterating over and over, we're not going digital, we're staying paper. I think it's purely a sales issue, right? Boxes are sitting on local game store shelves and they're not moving like they should because people aren't going to the locals and they aren't drafting.
Do you think it's also possible that Draft Fab was like taken down because of not LSS? Like maybe it was like internal wanting to shut it down or not wanting to support it anymore, and then they just used an LSS excuse. Like I still tinfoil hat theory. I could be completely wrong about this. Please don't attack me. I'm just throwing out possibilities.
I think there are people in the community that would have taken it over in a heartbeat. Like I know Jotrick, one of the big judges from Europe, probably would have taken it over in a heartbeat if that was the case. But they never, Mark, the person that was working on it, never like reached out to anybody or said anything about, hey, managing this is difficult. Does someone else want to take it over or work with me, right? Like, I feel like we would have seen that if he didn't want to anymore.
That's true. Yeah. In the end, it's kind of a strange change, but it could definitely affect people playing going forward, which is kind of saddening. So I think that this, I've seen a lot of split responses through Twitter, where it's like some people saying, well, this just widens the gap between teams that can regularly test draft and people who can't, or this widens the gap between casual and competitive in general. But it's like, I think this actually just affects everybody, because even testing within a team, if you're testing something like draft, it can get really stale, where you can read patterns of how people draft, and eventually you just all kind of shimmy into the same corners in every draft, which we've had that problem in the past and had to expand out. So I definitely think that this just affects everyone negatively and no one positively.
I think it does seem like it's only a negative effect, but there are some groups that I think will benefit from this, such as people in Europe who can easily travel to their other friends and their other teammates by things like train or by just being near each other because it's such a smaller region.
Would you take a train 2 hours to draft once?
Well, probably not once, but for like a weekend draft camp, I definitely would.
Sure, but that, like, people who would attend a weekend draft camp are not casual players 99.9% of the time.
Sure.
Like, that's kind of what people are talking about on Twitter, where it's like,
sure,
the competitive players gain more of an edge and the more casual side of competitive players take a major hit.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think me personally, I probably would still go like a 2-hour train because I can just sleep on the train.
Not everyone can look at events like you or Brody, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah. Anyways, with the draft discussion done, the Draft Fab discussion, let's talk about Bright Light's limited format. And starting off with Did you play in any Bright Lights pre-releases?
I did play in one this weekend. I played on Sunday. It was only 8 people, but it was still pretty good, pretty fun. I did go 3-0. I did win. I played a 40 card pile of Teclovacin cards that were block 3s, and I did what I think everyone else did: watch your opponent boost their deck away while you block them out.
Yeah, I ended up playing in 3 pre-releases, and I played really good Teclovacin deck in one, really good Max Nitro deck in the other, and then the third one we just agreed to an auto split from the beginning. So I just played. I had a pretty good Teclovacin deck, and I just went and played fun Max Nitro instead. None of my pools I felt like could have been Dash pools, and 2 of my pools I felt like could have been Teclovacin pools. So I think it's really important in this draft, or in this sealed format, which obviously doesn't really exist anymore, but in the sealed format, it was really easy to build Max Nitro. And then if your pool leaned one way or the other with items or evos, you could just shift over into being Teclo or Dash. But Max felt like the go-to hero. So it felt kind of like Fi in Uprising, where it's like the easiest to build in sealed.
I think that's pretty accurate. I didn't get to do as much as other people, but it felt really easy to default into Teclovacin, because I never felt like I wanted to make a Hyperdriver. And I felt like I wanted to play my Evos no matter what deck I was. So I might as well have the hero that's playing the Evos and then making my scrap cards better through his hero power.
Yeah, but like if you didn't have very many good scrap payoffs, or if you were like 1 or 2 Evos total, then it's really hard to play Teclovacin.
Sure, that's fair. I mean, I played mine with only 2 Evos, but I thought my pool was pretty good with a fair amount of 3 for 6s, 3 for 5s, 3 for 7s in my deck.
Yeah, I definitely think that it could shift together pretty well with a solid number of 2 for 5s, 3 for 6, 3 for 7s. I think those are like the key building point. Infused Titaniums, Scrap Hound, whatever that one's actually called.
I think it's Scrap Hound.
Taking things like the 2 for 5 boost cards.
Junkyard Dog.
Crankshaft, Big Bertha, all those well-statted cards that block for 3 and swing for big numbers are just really good, because you just want to block and block and block, and then if they give you a window to play something, you can just play a 3 for 7 from Arsenal, and then be like, I get a little bit of tempo back and some pressure, so that once I get 1 Evo, I can start swinging the gun.
I think you also definitely had to be careful all weekend about items. I think some people were playing more items than they should have, and it ended up biting them in the butt.
Yeah. One of the most interesting items in this format to me is the red boombox. Boombox is what I've been calling it. It's a backup protocol red, where when it enters, you can crank it. It enters with 1 counter, destroy it at the beginning of your turn if it doesn't have a counter on it, and then instant speed, pay 2, pop it, take a red action card from your graveyard and put it in your hand. And that card has been very, very interesting, like I said. It fits some decks very well and others very poorly, but it's like an anti-fatigue tool where with a blue you can pick up a 1 cost and swing. With Dash you get an item that you can play off the top, and then you could like get a 0 for 4 or a 0 for 3 and keep the chain going off of a single blue. Like it's very good in situations that it's good, but every time I played it this weekend, I felt like my deck was not the shell for it, so I kind of stumbled because it didn't block.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a card where like it's really strong when you get it off Dash IO, but otherwise you're just like going down a card in your hand to play it and to pick up another card. Like you're spending 2 cards to get 1 good card, which feels pretty bad sometimes.
Mm-hmm. In Max, it was a good way to not get fatigued because you could pick up a meaningful attack and still swing it. And in Teclo, it was a reasonable thing to pick up a good Arsenal card.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an instant, so you can like equip an Evo and then use it to just have an Arsenal. But it took a lot of resources to do that. So it's like a turn 1 play, but you can't pick up on turn 1. So you would just like end a chain with it. I don't know. It's kind of awkward.
It's pretty good if you have one of the big like Annihilator engine or Terminator tank or War Machines in your deck to pick up those really strong attacks once you have 3 or 4 Evos out as Teclovison.
Someone hit me with the Command and Conquer one.
Yeah, War Machine.
In pre-release.
That's gross.
For 4 Evos. I was like, okay. They were Teclo and I was Max Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
And I still won that game, just so we're clear.
That's crazy.
But that card is messed up whenever you can get it to pull off. And I think there's probably some merit to just like, I mean, you know me. I want to play mech, I want to block with it. There's some merit to some kind of Teclo list that just plays all of those as like a end game payoff, where you're just blocking, setting up Evos, and then going 3 for 7, 3 for 6, 3 for 6, 3 for 9 with just big on hit effects and like reasonable amounts of damage. So I think that there's probably some merit to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, especially once you flip into Singularity. Flip the Singularity into Teclovison, the Mechropotent, and all your mech attacks get go again.
Yeah,
I definitely see it.
Yeah, I mean, just swinging 3 for 6 is already really powerful. Like that's fine stats. But then if it has an on hit, and if it gets cheaper, or if it gets bigger, or if they can't block it, like that's also really big. Like really big.
Yeah, definitely. I think it scales very well, considering how poor they are when they start.
So that's like for pre-release, which is kind of gone now. Like sealed doesn't really happen outside of pre-release, it feels like in this game. Sometimes skirmishes and stuff, but those I don't think we have sealed skirmishes for this format, right? It's either draft or blitz.
I don't think we have skirmish info yet, but it probably will be draft or blitz.
Yeah. So it feels like sealed is probably done for bright lights. So the next important thing that we have to focus on is draft. How do you feel about theory crafting for draft for this format?
I think it will become really stale really quickly. As much as I hate to say that, I think the set is pretty solvable in the weapons and in the fact that most of the set is block 3s.
It feels like, so there were a few drafts that fired on the Runaways Discord, and they've got a channel where you can post your 3-0 deck lists. It feels like a lot of the lists, even if they were not Teclo, would have like an Evo or 2 in the sideboard and then the anti-fatigue wrench or the anti-fatigue gun.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's really easy to just like have a couple Evos in your deck since everyone starts out with the proto pieces. And to just like, oh, my opponent made me go first and I drew my what are they called, the like Evo Sentry base, one of the pieces. I get to play it on turn 0 and now I'm like +3 life in the games. Like I played a Sigil on turn 0 in Dromai.
Yeah,
right.
That also makes your next stuff bigger. Like it makes your payoffs bigger if you have any. It turns your wrench on. Like it's huge. It's way more than just 3 life.
Oh yeah. Even if it was just 3 life, it's really good. But the fact that it can work with all these Evo upgrade cards, or if you are playing Teclo Leveler, it can allow that card to just be insane. I think a lot of people might realize very quickly that there's one really good weapon in this set, one really bad weapon in this set, and one okay weapon in this set.
What do you think is the bad weapon?
I think Dash's weapon is really bad.
Whoa, that's a hot take.
I think the fact that you can't just use it on will is really bad. I think it's only good if you have the fuel injector in your Dash.io deck, the one that lets you pop it and put it on the bottom of its owner's deck to gain a resource.
Or Medkit or the other one.
I think fuel injector specifically, because in the late game when your deck's empty, the fuel injector itself can go infinite by playing it, and then on your next turn you can activate it, and then put it in your deck,
replay it.
and then replay it off its own resource and load the gun.
I think that they're all good if you're talking about a fatigue scenario, like especially where both players are fatigued, because like any of them, if you have an infinite number of turns where your opponent's not swinging you, then you're fine. Or if like you're at a 2 life disparity where you're at 3 and they're at 1 or whatever it is, and you have a med kit, then against Teklo, if they only have enough so that their weapon swings for 2, or if you're at a 3 life disparity and their weapon swings for 3, then gaining that 2 life could be an extra weapon swing.
Sure. I think that's definitely true. But if you're not doing anything more than that, it becomes really hard to close out the game. I see a lot of scenarios where you can get into infinite loops where like a Teklo only has his gun for 2 and a Dash only has a med kit. Oh no, you've drawn.
Well, no, that's not a draw because you have to take a turn to play the med kit and a turn to pop the med kit.
Isn't it an instant to pop it?
No, it's an action.
Oh, I thought that one was an instant, like the other two. Maybe that's
the other one's also an action. The fuel injector?
No, that one's an instant. That one is an instant because I'm staring right at it.
Is it? Okay. Medkit? Is it just called Medkit?
Yeah, medkit, no space. That one is an action. And the steam canister, the one that puts steam counter, that one is an instant also.
Yeah, so it's just medkit that's an action. Which
I think that can lead to some very interesting design and some very interesting gameplay.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to? Do you have like any standout pack one pick one cards that every time you see it you're gonna pack one pick one it?
Yeah, I think obviously there's a few Majestics that are really good, like Twin Drive or Heist, but those are bombs, right? We're not necessarily always going to see those. I think some of the really big standout ones are a lot of the 3-for-7s and 3-for-6s in the set, such as
Infused Titanium.
Yeah, Infused Titanium. The Junkyard Dog. All of those cards are very strong. I think probably my number one pack one pick one that I've seen so far in Limited, it's probably got to be Lay Waste, is one that I've really been enjoying seeing. It's the 2-for-5 that can't be defended by equipment. I think a lot of people are undervaluing that effect, since the Evos, when they're in your hand, are still equipment.
Yeah, I think the overpower mechanic and the can be defended by equipment are both equally important for this format. Overpower just as a form of dominate, because there's nothing else you can block with besides the mechanologist blocks, and those are pretty underwhelming as cards, like to put in your deck. So when you have equipment equipped like Evos that block, they're still actions as well. So overpower, very powerful. And then can't block with equipment, still matters if it's in your hand, like you said. If you're Teklo and you've got 5 equipment in your field and hand combined, you're very limited in what you can block with, and that can sometimes close the windows for opportunities that you get in a limited format where you might be able to turn the table.
Yeah, definitely.
Combined with, if you end up with items, then you have no options.
I think one big card that I think a lot of people realize very quickly is very strong is Firewall Red. A lot of people are going to be scared by the effect where you reveal the top card, and if it's an Evo, you leave it there. If it's not, you put it on bottom. But it's a 4-block that gets around overpower, and it gets around all of these. If you can't block with equipment, or you can't block with, or if you block with equipment, it gets buffed. All of those effects that hurt your Evos, Firewall just says, I don't care. Here's a block 4.
Yeah, so Firewall Red is really good, obviously because it blocks breakpoints and it can go into overpower. When I said that the things that cover overpower are underwhelming, I meant like Firewall Yellow, Firewall Blue, the Galvanized mechanic where you have to sack an item, the block that says if it's defending a thing with overpower, it gets +2. Like, I'm not rushing to put any of those cards in my deck, because at their core, they are cards that are either pitch or block. Like, they can't win me the game usually. So unless I'm Teklo and I just know that I'm going to be swinging the gun, or I know I'm going to be equipping Evo or activating hero power, then I'm not inclined to put like yellow firewall in my deck as much as like any yellow 0-cost boost to attack. Because I would just rather have another attack in my deck. So most of the things that cover overpower are just kind of medium limited, I think, at least.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think there are a couple cards like Dissolving Shield and Mini Force Field that do a really good job of getting around that also by being items that have ward or prevention effects on them that can definitely shift a lot of how we draft and how we value overpower in this format.
Mm-hmm. It did feel like a lot of games this weekend came down to overpower. Like, you would just find the overload script and overpower a couple of breakpoints to get the last few points through, or it would be like overpower beating the fatigue deck because they weren't able to block through it. So maybe I'm just not valuing these cards high enough. Like, maybe these blocks are good, or maybe some of these items that end a chain to prevent some damage are really good. Maybe I'm just wrong. To me, it felt a little underwhelming. So that's another thing that we'll have to experiment with in the draft format. We're still very fresh to it. Neither of us have drafted at all for this format. But we've played a little bit of limited. We've looked at the cards. We've looked at the pool. So that's kind of why at the beginning of this I said that this was mostly going to be theory crafting. And there's some interesting points to be made here for everything that we brought up. So like the items in the deck, the blocks, just everything all around. This is an interesting set, but I do think you're right that it has the potential to go stale. While I have it on my mind, did you have any issues at your pre-release with draws?
I don't think we had any draws at ours, but again, we were only 8 people with several new players. So I think a lot of people were just like trying to play the cards and trying to enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm. We had, in 3 pre-releases that I went to, I saw 7 draws where the game drew because no one could win. It was like an unwinnable game state for both players, and they had to start a second game with the time left. 7 times. Every single one either ended with somebody conceding to the other player or with someone just flat out winning. But it was really interesting to have a limited format like this where you could just have that many legitimate draws because of like an unwinnable game state for one player.
I think that's a bit of a flaw in the design of this set. When you look at the set, you can see very quickly that they underpowered quite a few things, right? Like we have 0 to 50, Razzle Dazzle, Full Tilt, Gas Guzzler, these 0 for 3, 0 for 4, 2 for 5, and 3 for 6 boost attacks that aren't making breakpoints like we had from Arcane Rising with 0 to 60, Zipper Hit, and Throttle. Mm-hmm. And so when you're not making those breakpoints, you're not pushing the game state, you're not advancing it too much. And that can lead to a lot of those problems.
I think that's why Teklo has so much power, is because he's got the only weapon that you can, like, or I guess he doesn't have it, but he works best with the weapon that works with Evos, where you can just swing it no matter what. So it can prevent some of those board states.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think one of the things that I noticed was it seems a lot harder to open Majestics in your pool due to the expansion slot, because they're still balancing out 6, 7, 8 Majestics in a box. But when 2 or sometimes even 3 of them are the expansion slot, it leads to a lot less power cards in a draft. When there's less bombs, less power cards, people aren't going to be able to close out the games as much with things like no Terminator tanks or no war machines, or even some of those items with interesting effects like TikTok clock.
Yeah. This format's really interesting, and I really want to see more of it. Like the draft, it is very important, obviously, but it's got a lot of flaws with the design in it, I think, because of being able to pop up things like that where it can be a problem for actually ending a game. But maybe that's just like a product of pre-release. Maybe you're right.
I think there's one good design change that LSS made. Legendaries and Fableds are not draftable. I think that is the greatest thing that they've done yet, because anytime I've opened a Legendary in draft, I've 3-0'd that pod without failure because of how powerful and how strong they are. And welcome to Wraith. If you open a Tectonic Plating as Bravo, you just start at 23 life. That's anytime that you can start with more life than your opponent, you're winning games.
Yeah, there was literally a draft game at Worlds where I went 5-1 in draft at Worlds last year. My one loss was to somebody who opened a Crown of Providence. I lost because they were at 2. So not even counting the card selection, just that 2 life literally saved them the game.
Yeah, it is very strong. And thankfully we won't have that this time around. So you won't be able to open a Tectile Foundry Heart and go, oh, I'm at 23 life. I'm winning every game.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's take a look at this draft pack that I have sent you a picture of, and I've got it pulled up here on my screen. This is a draft pack of Fab for Bright Lights, opened by one of our teammates, Matt W. And we have some very interesting cards in this pack in particular. This is the pack that has the Cogworks base legs in the top left and the Torque tuned in the bottom right with the empty bottom right slot. Yeah. To make sure that we're looking at the same one. So what do you think is the pack one, pick one for this pack?
This one's really interesting. So we talked about this a little bit in the Discord together. I think this pack is really, really underwhelming. But at first glance, I think I want to just grab either the Junkyard Dog, the yellow Junkyard Dog in the middle, the red Underloop to its left, or the yellow mini Force Field in the top row. That's what I see immediately. Yellow Junkyard Dog, when it scraps something, is still a 3 for 6, which is on rate. If it can't scrap, it's a 3 for 5, so it's still usually taking 2 cards. The Underloops are really good at beating fatigue by being a 1 for 4 that can go on the bottom of the deck if they hit. So sometimes it might force an armor block or 2 cards out of your opponent for being 1 card itself.
Which both are really good.
Yes, both of those effects are really good. And then, like we were just talking about earlier, Mini Force Field is really strong with those ward effects being able to prevent extra damage or suck up block into 1 turn to where you're able to keep a card or 2 and try and swing the tempo back into your favor.
Yeah. For me, it's a little bit different. Junkyard Dog, I think, is my pack one, pick one. If this Junkyard Dog isn't in the pack, it's probably the Evo Buzz Hive, because that one is the instant that gives you a resource, which can also be very useful. That one is probably the only non-majestic 0-block Evo I would take, or even consider as a pack one, pick one. The resource felt pretty huge with being able to just instant it in, turn on my gun so that I am able to swing it later, and then manage the resource for something immediately. Or just act as a pitch card if I needed it to pitch and wasn't able to equip it.
Yeah, I think that one is really good for that reason. The only reason I wasn't as high on taking it is because it doesn't block. And I really, really don't like playing no blocks in my deck.
Yeah, I think if you're playing Teklo, or if you're dedicating to Teklo, then like 1 or 2 is fine. But it has to be something that's going to progress your game in a meaningful way, like an Evo. And so, like, for that reason, I'm fine taking an Evo Buzz Hive. And I think it's very powerful. Some of the other discussion that we had in the Discord was about Cogworks base legs, because the Cogworks items are very powerful. Cogworks base legs in particular can help you do 2 chain enders, or like prevent you from having to boost a second time in a turn. Both of those are really strong because this format does come down to fatigue quite a bit. I'm probably not taking Cogworks base legs over a card like Underloop for the purpose of like thinking about not getting fatigued. Underloop is just better because, like you said, 2 cards or a card and an armor, which are basically the same thing in this format. And if they don't, then it just goes to the bottom. You get another breakpoint later, and they took damage. So my pack order here is Junkyard Dog, Evo Buzz Hive, Underloop, Cogwork Space Legs.
I think that's fair. I think I got convinced enough by Jacob Baugh that I don't ever want to take an armor piece unless I'm forced to. I think I want to just have as many cards in my deck as possible because I am horrified of getting fatigued in this format.
That's fair.
I think you're pretty on the mark there with Junkyard Dog being the pick.
Yeah. I think that this draft format is really interesting, like we've said before, and I'm excited to explore it more and check out more of how it interacts, especially on a more competitive level than just a pre-release.
Mm-hmm.
So one final question before we wrap things up. I've been asking everybody, and you kind of touched on it at the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But besides yourself, you had to pick someone else. I know, you're upset. If you had to pick someone else,
fine.
Who is going to win Worlds this year?
Jacob Baugh. I think Jacob is an exceptional player. And I think a lot of people undervalue how good he is and how strong his mind is at the game.
I think that is very true. We were kind of shocked whenever we were looking at the Canadian players draft for the U.S. Nationals. And we were like, man, they didn't pick Jacob at all. And then later, Sean was like, oh, I tried to pick Jacob, and he wasn't on the qualified players list because Jacob used a PTI for U.S. Nats this year.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, oh, yeah, he'll be there. But then somebody else had a pick that didn't show up, and they got to default to Jacob as their next pick.
Yeah, that was pretty funny with Easton Douglas not showing up. Jacob took that slot, but that was really funny whenever they didn't have Jacob, because I was like, man, they picked me, but Jacob got passed over? That didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm not going to complain.
Battle-hardened extraordinaire, Matthew McInnis. Come on.
Fair enough. Hopefully I can get another one out, or maybe a calling this year.
Heck yeah. I am rooting for you, and I am rooting for the rest of Magnolia. Hopefully I can pop the 9th place bubble. But that is the competitive game for Flesh and Blood. I'm excited to see what this next year brings, but I am more excited to see what you think of this book here. It looks like this will be due back in 2 weeks, and I will see you there.